and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we'll be analysing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 27th March 2019. The topics to be discussed today are reflected on your screen and the timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let's begin. This news appears on page number 13 and is in the respect of the Finance Commission. From the perspective of your syllabus, it will fall under GS Paper 2 under the category of powers and functions of various constitutional bodies and will also fall under GS Paper 3 under the topic of issues related to the economy. Now the context of the news is that recently the RBI governor had pitched for setting up a permanent finance commission in India. But however, in today's news, this proposal of setting up a permanent finance commission has been opposed by the former RBI governor Y.V. Reddy. So in this regard, let us understand the two divergent viewpoints as far as having a permanent finance commission is concerned. Now before we discuss the two divergent viewpoints, we first need to understand from where this term permanent is coming from, as to why there is a requirement of having a permanent finance commission. Now the finance commission has been provided for under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution, which reads that the President shall, within 2 years from the commencement of this Constitution and thereafter, at the expiration of every 5th year or at such time earlier as the President considers necessary, by order constitute a finance commission which will consist of a chairman and 4 other members which are to be appointed by the President. Therefore, this article gives us a few crucial information. First is that Finance Commission is not a permanent body as of now and it has to be constituted by the President at the expiration of every 5th year or at such earlier time if the President deems fit. Secondly, it says that the composition of the Finance Commission will be that it will have a chairman and 4 other members. The qualification for the chairman and the 4 other members can be determined by the Parliament through a law, and in furtherance of this power given to the Parliament had enacted the Finance Commission Act of 1951, which has prescribed certain qualification for the chairman and the member, but we will not go into that because that doesn't fall in the ambit of our today's discussion. Now there are two divergent viewpoints. One viewpoint says that the Finance Commission should be given a permanent status, whereas the other viewpoint says that rather than giving a permanent status to the Finance Commission, there is a need to strengthen the Niti Aayog. Why and how, we'll see that later. So coming to the first viewpoint, now what has happened is that over a period of time, the Finance Commission has adopted various different approaches with regard to principles of tax devolution, grants to be given to the states, as well as fiscal consolidation. And so now the proponents of this viewpoint say that even though we do require fresh and innovative thinking by every Finance Commission, but at another level, we need to ensure a broader consistency between the Finance Commissions so that there is some degree of certainty. And this certainty has to be there as far as parameters regarding the terms of reference is concerned. And secondly, we need a consistency so that there is some degree of certainty in the flow of funds, especially to the states. Now let us understand this. There are two kinds of distribution. One is the vertical and other is the horizontal. So vertical is the distribution between the center and the state. So many of you must be knowing that the 14th Finance Commission had said that the center will now have 58% of the funds, whereas the states who earlier used to get 32% of funds will now get 42% of these funds. So this is the vertical division between the center and the state. Now out of this 42%, the next layer of division is the horizontal division, where this 42% will be divided amongst 29 states. And for this horizontal division, there are certain parameters which the Finance Commission takes into consideration while deciding which state will get how much of funds. So out of these parameters, population has always been a consistent parameter which every Finance Commission has considered. Second parameter, area, has also been a consistent one. Income distance is another parameter. Now, but the 14th Finance Commission had added 2 new parameters, namely area under forest and the second was demographic change. Now, please, you do not have to remember all these parameters. We are discussing this so that you can better understand how the inconsistency between the parameters arises, which leads to a lot of confusion. So as we were discussing, both of these have been added by the 14th Finance Commission. But till the time of 13th Finance Commission, there was these three parameters, and the fourth parameter was related to fiscal discipline. But the 14th Finance Commission removed this fiscal discipline parameter and added these two parameters. Now all these parameters become very important because on the basis of these all parameters only, the Commission decides which state should get what amount of funds. So hence the argument here is that every Finance Commission, according to its own liking, changes these parameters, and this leads to a lot of inconsistency. Because usually what happens is that during the term of one Finance Commission, one state probably would be getting higher funds, but the next Finance Commission comes and changes the term, and then that state would not be getting so much of fund. So hence in a way their planning process also becomes very disruptive due to such haphazard change in the parameters. Therefore it is said that having a permanent Finance Commission would ensure broader consistency as far as the terms of reference and the parameters are concerned, and even the flow of funds to the state is concerned. Therefore, to have some kind of continuity, a permanent Finance Commission has to be there. And the third point which they say is that this Finance Commission can function as a leaner entity, that is, it will not have much functions, in the intervening period till the time next Finance Commission is set up in a full-fledged manner. And during this intervening period, this Finance Commission can address issues which arose from the implementations of the recommendations of the previous Finance Commission. Which is to say, for example, the 14th Finance Commission gave certain recommendations which were now implemented. So currently what happens is now when the 15th Finance Commission is set up, it does not really look into the issues which arose while implementing the recommendations of the previous Finance Commission. So therefore it is felt that if we have a permanent Finance Commission, then this permanent Finance Commission in the intervening period can look into the issues whatever arose while the implementation of the recommendations of the Finance Commission. Hence for these reasons, the proponents continuously push for having a permanent Finance Commission. Now the second side says that the present mechanism of setting up a Finance Commission every 5 years is working perfectly fine. However, there is a need to strengthen the fiscal federalism in India by empowering the Niti Aayog with transfer of finances. So the first argument they give is that we need to strengthen the Niti Aayog in order to strengthen the fiscal federalism in our country. And they explain it this way, that earlier in our country, there were two bodies which were functioning. One was the Planning Commission and the other was the Finance Commission. And this Planning Commission was involved with the transfer of finances to the states, and hence to a certain extent was able to reduce the regional imbalances between the states. Because what this Planning Commission used to do is that it used to allocate less money to the better developed state and used to allocate more money to the states which were facing a lot of imbalances and were poor. Hence the Planning Commission, by using its discretion in a way, was able to reduce these regional imbalances. But now what has happened is that this Planning Commission has been replaced by the Niti Aayog. And since the Niti Aayog is more like a think tank, this Niti Aayog does not have any power in relation to transferring of finances. So therefore they say the problem has arisen that India's fiscal federalism stands only on one pillar now, that is the Union Finance Commission. And this, according to them, is a serious weakness of our present fiscal federalism and needs to be quickly corrected. Therefore, they are pushing that in addition with the Finance Commission, we should harper back to the previous times, where now we should even give the power of transferring finances to the Niti Aayog. Further, in order to prove their argument, they have placed reliance on what is called as conditional convergence. According to the proponents of this viewpoint, India has been experiencing the process of conditional convergence, wherein the poor states have been growing more rapidly than the richer states, and this has led to a reduction in the income inequality. And they say that this conditional convergence has happened only on the account of transfer of finances by the Planning Commission. So they say had the Planning Commission not given money to the poorer states, there could have been no conditional convergence in India, which it is now experiencing. Therefore, finally they are saying that there is a strong analytical case to strengthen the role of Niti Aayog and to vest it with powers of allocating finances to the states. Fourthly, they say that if the Finance Commission is made into a permanent body, It will not remain as impartial and unbiased as it is today because it will be under the influence of the government continuously. Hence, they feel that today, the way the Finance Commission is, it is a very impartial and independent body and should allow to remain so. Thus, these were the two diverging viewpoints. With this, let's move on to our next news. This news appears on page number 7 and says that the government has notified the Drugs and the Clinical Trial Rules 2019. From the perspective of your syllabus, it will fall under GS Paper 2 in the subtopic of issues relating to health as well as government policies and intervention for development in various sectors. Now the government, in order to encourage clinical research in India, has notified the Drugs and Clinical Trial Rules of 2019. So the aim of these Drug and Clinical Trial Rule is firstly to promote clinical research in India. Secondly, it wants to make the regulation of clinical trials more transparent, effective and responsive. And thirdly, these rules will push for a faster accessibility of new drugs in India. Thus, the new rules focus on clinical research, regulation of clinical trials, as well as the accessibility of new drugs in our country. Second, as far as the applicability of these new rules are concerned, these Drug and Clinical Trial Rule of 2019 will apply to clinical trials, bioavailability or bioequivalence study, and thirdly, for the new drugs as well. We'll talk about the clinical trials later. Bioequivalence is a term which is used to assess the expected bioequivalence property of two preparations of a drug. In simple terms, if two products are said to be bioequivalent, it means that they would be expected to, for all intent and purposes, to be the same. Thus, if two drugs have the same intent and purpose and the same effect on the human body, then that study is known as bioequivalence. This is not the technical but is rather a loose definition of bioequivalence so that you have a general idea about this term. Let us now look at the main point which these rules are stating. The first is that these rules require the informed consent of the patient who are enlisted for undergoing clinical trials. Therefore, without the informed consent, a patient cannot be enlisted for a clinical trial. Further, these rules also provide for a compensation wherein it says that in case of death or of a permanent disability or an injury caused due to a clinical trial, compensation will be provided to the patient and that compensation will be decided by an ethics committee. Second, these rules talk about faster approvals of clinical trials, wherein they state that the time for approving applications for clinical trial is 30 days for the drugs manufactured in India and 90 days for drugs developed outside India. Further, these rules also provide for the waiver of local trial, which means that a new drug which has been developed outside India will be automatically allowed in India if, firstly, the global trial of that drug included Indian patients, and secondly, that drug is approved and marketed in any of the countries which are listed by the DGCI. For example, the European Union, Canada, Japan, US, UK and Australia. Last but the most important is that these rules now provide for a single ethics committee for the approval of drugs and clinical trial, as opposed to the tedious process where for the clinical trial there was a 3-tier approval process. Moving ahead, let us discuss what could be the impact of these new rules on the sector of clinical research in our country. The first impact these new rules are likely to have is that now there will be a faster accessibility to new drugs. The reason is that due to the waiver clause, which is extended to drugs developed in certain countries, this waiver clause will ensure that drugs are introduced in Indian market sooner and are available to the people faster. And secondly, since the new rules encourage faster approval with a 30 days and the 90 days window, this will encourage both the domestic as well as the foreign companies to initiate clinical trials in India. The second is that these rules could promote clinical research industry in our country. A good reason for this is the compensation clause, because due to this compensation clause, various companies will be encouraged to initiate clinical trials for new drugs in India. Because earlier what used to happen, in case of a mishap like permanent disability or death, the company had to pay 60% compensation upfront. That is, without giving a chance, without any hearing, the company had to give 60% compensation to the patient. But now, under this compensation clause, as we had discussed, the amount of the compensation will be decided by the ethics committee of the DGCI. Hence, it has come as a relief to the companies, thereby fostering and promoting clinical research industry in India. Now, as far as clinical trials are concerned, clinical trials are basically the clinical test of a new drugs on human beings after they have been tested on animals or in the laboratories. Because obviously, if a new drug has to be rolled out, it first has to be tested for the safety and efficacy. So what happens is once the drug is discovered, it goes for preclinical testing where it is either tested on animals or in the laboratory, and if it is successful there, then it undergoes for clinical trial where it is tested on human. And if it is even safe and effective of human, then that new drug is registered and finally launched in the market. Hence, in a way, clinical trials are very important and crucial for the drug development sector. With this, let's move on to our next news. This news appears on page number 7 and says that India's carbon dioxide emissions have increased by 5% according to a report by the International Energy Agency. Our discussion will fall under the category of general issues related to environment ecology as far as prelims are concerned, and in your GS paper 3 in the subtopic of environment as far as mains is concerned. Now, the International Energy Agency has come out with a report which says that India's carbon dioxide emissions have risen by almost 5% in the last 1 year. As per the report, India emitted almost 23 million tons of carbon dioxide in the year 2018, which is a rise of 4.8% from last year, that is 2017. Secondly, the report says that India's emission growth this year was higher than that of USA and China, which are the two biggest emitters in the world. As per the report, the reason cited for such an increase is the rise in the coal consumption in India. Further, as far as India's per capita emissions are concerned, the report said that India's per capita emissions were about 40% of the global average, and secondly, that it contributed to almost 7% of the global carbon dioxide burden. Now, though we have looked at what are the findings of this International Energy Agency's report, but these findings only make sense if we look at them in the context of India's target which it had pledged to achieve at the Paris Summit. The first is that India has promised to reduce its emission intensity by the year 2030 to the 2005 levels. And second target is that India has committed to have 40% of its energy from renewable sources by the year 2030. Now, this term emission intensity is basically a measure of the greenhouse gas emission. This emission intensity is the ratio of the greenhouse gas emission produced in an economy per unit of the economic activity, which is usually the GDP. To give you an example, it would mean how much of greenhouse gas emission will be there per unit of the GDP. That is, say, for example, if India's GDP has been increased by 2%, then for that 2% GDP, how much greenhouse gas emission would be there, that will be measured by the emission intensity. So thus in its target, India has said that it will reduce its greenhouse gas emission per unit of the GDP. But here you have to understand one thing. If the GDP of the country is growing, then it is not possible to actually reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Because if India is growing and producing more, then obviously more greenhouse gas emission would be there, and hence the absolute value of the greenhouse gas emission is not possible to come down. So therefore India has said that by the year 2030, it will try to reduce its greenhouse gas emission level to the 2005 level. Let us now very briefly even talk about the International Energy Agency. This International Energy Agency was founded in the year 1974, and the IEA was initially designed to help countries coordinate a collective response to major disruptions in supply of oil. Hence, originally, it only used to deal with issues related to oil supply. But now, the IEA examines a full spectrum of energy issues, including oil, gas, coal supply, renewable energy, etc., and also looks into accessibility to energy, the energy demand, the energy efficiency, and the management of the same. This next point is very important from the perspective of your prelims, wherein this International Energy Agency publishes reports, out of which their flagship ones is the World Energy Outlook and the second is the Key World Energy Statistics. Therefore, please remember the name of these two reports which is published by the International Energy Agency. So with this, let's move on to our next news. Now this news appears on page number 2 and is talking about the traditional folk dance of the Jodi Shankha. Since it's a dance form, it will fall under the category of art and culture from the perspective of your prelims. The context of this article is that the Biju Janata Dal in Odisha has the conch or the shankha as its election symbol, and this has become a catalyst for the promotion of the Jodi Shankha dance, because the BJP is now using this folk dance during most of its political activities. So as part of a discussion, we will be only focusing on this Jodi Shankha dance. Now the literal meaning of the term Jodi Shankha means a double conch. This Jodi Shankha is a traditional folk dance of the Ganjam district of Odisha. Though it originated in the Ganjam district, but it has now spread throughout Odisha. A remarkable feature of this dance form is the extreme use of the lung power, because the performers of this dance blow two fused conchs to make music. So as the name suggests, the performers have a Jodi Shankha or a connected or a fused conch which they blow in order to make music and sound. Further, the most noteworthy part of this Jodi Shankha dance is the harmony between the modulation of the conch music and the physical movements of the artists. Thus, in this Jodi Shankha dance, the sound from the conch shell is mixed with the rhythm of dance, and the performers are continuously modulating or adapting their dance moves in accordance with the sound produced out of the conch shells. In addition to the shankhas, the accompanying instruments in this dance are the traditional drums called the changu and the mahuri, which is the Odia version of the shehnai. Thus, in this dance, in addition to the conchs, even the drums and the shehnai, which are known as the changu and the mahuri respectively, are also used. Further, a lot of historians believe that this Jodi Shankha dance has a humble beginning in the martial arts, which is very much evident from the fact that this dance performance requires extreme lung power and stamina, which usually the martial artists have. Now, though of late, this Jodi Shankha dance is being continuously used and seen during political rallies and processions, but traditionally they were always used in religious and social processions. Hence, the main source of these Jodi Shankha artists was by performing during various religious, marriage and other social ceremonies. Now, to give you all a better idea as to what kind of questions UPSC has been asking and can ask in the upcoming examination, let us analyze a few prelims questions related to dance forms which have been asked in the previous year. Now, this first question was asked in the year 2017 and was in relation to the Manipuri Sankirtana. The first statement read, "It is a song and dance performance." This statement was correct. Manipuri Sankirtana is a form of performing art involving ritual singing, drumming and dancing performed in the temples and domestic spaces in Manipur. The second statement, cymbals are the only musical instruments used in the performance. Now this statement was incorrect. In addition to the cymbals, this dance form also uses cylindrical drums known as the Manipuri Mridang. And the third statement, it is performed to narrate the life and deeds of Lord Krishna. This was correct. So the right answer to this question was B, 1 and 3 only. So as you can see in this question, they first asked what basically this Sankirtana is, and then they specifically asked about the musical instrument which is used in this dance performance. And in the third statement, they asked the theme of this dance performance. Moving ahead, in the year 2014, two questions were asked. The first was in reference to the famous Satriya dance. The first statement, Satriya is a combination of music, dance and drama. This statement is correct. This Satriya is recognized as one of the 8 classical dance forms of India, and this Satriya is a dance drama which has evolved in the state of Assam. The second statement, it is a centuries-old living tradition of Vaishnavites of Assam. This statement is also correct. Third, it is based on classical ragas and talas of devotional songs composed by Tulsidas, Kabir and Mirabai. This statement is incorrect. So the right answer to this question was B, 1 and 2. Moving ahead, this third question has given us pairs of the state and the related dance form. So the first, Garba and Gujarat, this is correct. Second, Mohiniyattam and Odisha, this is incorrect. Mohiniyattam is a classical dance form of the state of Kerala. Third, Yakshagana and Karnataka, this is also correct. So the right answer here was C, 1 and 3 only. With this, let's move on to our next article. Now this news is an article appearing on page number 8, and it's basically talking how the Aadhaar payment bridge is causing a lot of problem, due to which many people are not getting the benefits they are entitled under various welfare schemes. Now before we go on to talk what are the problems associated with this Aadhaar payment bridge system, we first need to understand how funds are actually transferred. Now let us understand this. Now there are two processes which are involved in the transfer of funds. One is the seeding and the second is the mapping. Seeding, to very simply put, means linking one's Aadhaar number with one's bank account. So let's say this is a customer here. So for example, if today I have to seed my account, then I would go to my bank and give them my Aadhaar card details, and then that bank will seed my account number with my Aadhaar. So what happens is that with the bank now has my Aadhaar details and obviously has my account details. Now in an ideal situation, for this seeding, a bank needs to have a certain infrastructure where for the seeding, it has provisions for biometric authentication. Further, the bank also needs to have all my financial details. So in an ideal situation, such kind of information and infrastructure should be available with the bank. Now once the seeding is done, that is linking of my Aadhaar card with my bank account, the next process is of mapping. Now before we understand mapping, you have to understand that if this is the government here, and for example I am a beneficiary, then for me to get any kind of subsidy or any kind of benefit under a scheme from the government, this benefit to me from the government will be routed through the National Payment Corporation of India or the NPCI, which essentially means that the government uses this National Payment Corporation India database to identify various beneficiaries under the various schemes. Now mapping basically means that this bank here, whatever information related to seeding has been provided to it, this information has to be entered by the bank into the NPCI database. And it is the responsibility of this bank only to feed all this information in this database. Now after all this information has been provided, the government will use this NPCI database to identify various beneficiaries. To give you an example, say under one scheme, the government hypothetically has to make payments to 10 beneficiaries. So the government will only have the Aadhaar number of these 10 beneficiaries. So the government will go into this database, feed this 10 Aadhaar number, and then whatever bank account is corresponding to these 10 account number, the government will directly tell the NPCI to put money into those bank account without cross-verifying whether that Aadhaar number is actually linked to that beneficiary or whether it is linked to a false account. So this you have to keep in mind that there is no cross-verification at this stage by the government. The government will make payments only on the basis of the Aadhaar card. So this is how this process actually works, and this entire system or process is what is essentially the Aadhaar payment bridge system. Now let us understand the problems which have been associated with this. The first problem is of diversion of payments or funds. Let us understand how this diversion happens. So for example, today I have multiple bank accounts. I have an account at PNB, SBI, HDFC, etc. Plus I even hold accounts on my Paytm wallet or say Airtel wallet. So basically what happens under this NPCI process is that this NPCI, in case of multiple accounts for the same person, it will automatically send money to the last map account. So for example, if the last account to which I linked my Aadhaar number was my Paytm wallet, then that money will get transferred into my Paytm wallet. But because of this, what happens is that there usually happens a diversion of payment. Because today somebody might have linked it to their Paytm wallet unknowingly, unwillingly, or without even remembering it. And then the next day they might be expecting that they will receive the payment in their main SBI or their PNB account. So due to this, there is diversion of payments where the payment, rather than coming into the main bank account, would rather get transferred to your Airtel wallet or your Paytm wallet. So this is the first issue of diversion of payments. The second is that sometimes the money gets transferred to a third party. Now in this case, the money gets transferred to a third party due to accidentally linking the Aadhaar card to a wrong bank account number. This can happen due to a lot of reasons. Due to faulty KYC done by the bank where the bank does not cross-check it, and can also happen if your Aadhaar card gets lost or is stolen. Then that person can use your Aadhaar and can probably link their Paytm wallet or their ATM wallet to your Aadhaar card, and then they will receive the payment which was intended to you. And the third problem is that the funds do not get transferred at all. Now again, if you go back to the process, you will realize that this third situation can happen if the NPCI database does not have your Aadhaar number linked to your bank account. And this usually happens when it is your bank who is at fault, who forgets to put all your information into the NPCI database. And this is something which the authors have been speaking about in these articles, that even the managers at the bank are very confused in the difference between seeding and mapping. A lot of bank personnel feel that seeding itself is mapping. So many times they will seed your Aadhaar number with your bank account, but they will not feed all this information to the NPCI database. So of course, when it comes to the government to transfer the fund, the government does not have that information and the funds do not get transferred at all. And this is one of the major reasons why many beneficiaries under various welfare schemes are not getting the funds. So this article here was basically explaining us this process and was trying to highlight what are the problems with this process and what are the repercussions or the consequences which are happening these days due to such problems. The specific points of this article and the specific problems which this article has highlighted has been provided to you in the PDF. But as far as the discussion was concerned, it is more important to understand this process of how payments are actually made under a lot of welfare schemes, especially through the route of Aadhaar. With this, let's move on to our next news. This news appears on page number 18, and the context is that scientists have discovered a network of lakes beneath the Totten Lake in East Antarctica, and this finding is very critical in order to predict the impact of melting polar ice on the world's ocean. Now as mentioned, if you look in the diagram here is the Antarctica and the Totten Glacier is located in East Antarctica. Now basically researchers from the Australian Antarctic Division undertook seismic studies on this Totten Glacier in order to find what is located in its bedrock. Whether it has rocks in its bottom, whether it has water, whether it has subglacial lakes, ocean, etc. So after undertaking this seismic study, the researchers have found that this Totten Glacier has massive subglacial lakes located beneath it. Now the reason why the researchers wanted to discover what is beneath this Totten Glacier is because the speed at which the glacier moves is largely determined by what is under that glacier. So for example, if there is a bedrock under the glacier, then the glacier becomes very sticky and will move very slowly. But if there is water or soft sediments or ice under this glacier, then the glacier will move a lot faster. And hence this study has shown that there exists substantial amounts of water in the subglacial lakes located beneath the Totten Lake. Now eventually what will happen is that the amount of water located in the subglacial lake will actually control the rate at which the water or this ice will flow into the ocean, ultimately affecting the sea level. Thus, this discovery will now help the researchers to find out how in the future the sea level or the ocean levels of the world will rise, taking into consideration the rate at which this subglacial water will flow out into the oceans. With this, let's move on to our next news. This next news appears on page number 9 and talks about what is simultaneous selection. Now, the topic of simultaneous selection has been covered very exhaustively in the DNS dated 5th March 2019. You can refer to this DNS for more information. With this, let's move on to our next news. This next news appears on page number 30 and talks about the first dollar-rupee buy and sell swap. Now, this topic has been covered comprehensively in the DNS of 22nd March 2019. You can refer to this for further information. Now, based on today's discussion, here is the first set of prelims practice question. Please pause the video and we'll discuss the answer after 5 seconds. The first question reads, consider the following statements about Aadhaar payment bridge system. The first, APBS uses Aadhaar number as a central key for electronically channelizing the government benefits and subsidies in the Aadhaar-enabled bank account. This is correct. Second, APBS is implemented by Securities and Exchange Board of India. This is incorrect. APBS is implemented by the National Payment Corporation of India. Hence, the right answer is A, one only. Question number 2 reads, Totten Lake, which has been recently in news, is located, and the right answer is D, Antarctica. Now here is the second set of prelims practice question. Please pause the video and we'll discuss the answer after 5 seconds. Question number 3 reads, which of the following parameters are used in the 14th Finance Commission for horizontal distribution of taxes? First, population is correct. Second, area of state is correct. Third, fiscal discipline is incorrect. Fiscal discipline was used by the 13th Finance Commission. And fourth, income distribution. And fourth, income distance is also correct. Hence, the right answer is C, 1, 2 and 4 only. Question number 4 reads, which of the following have been provided in new drugs and clinical trial rule of 2019? 1. Informed consent is correct. Second, compensation is right. Third, waiver of local trial is also right. Fourth, single ethics committee is also correct. Hence, the right answer is D, 1, 2, 3 and 4 only. Now, yesterday, Naved sir had shared the PDF link for compilation of questions from Environment and Ecology section from our previous DNS practice questions. In case you have missed that, please find the link to that PDF in the description section below. With this, we come to an end for today's discussion. Let's move to the question for the day.